You may notice that thoughts feel clearer on some days than others. Not sharper in a dramatic way, just steadier. Words come more easily, focus feels less strained, and the mind doesn't feel quite as crowded. Those days often aren't random. They're usually shaped by small, quiet habits that support the brain over time, often without drawing much attention to themselves. Today's conversation is about daily habits that support long-term brain health. Not quick fixes, not complicated routines, and not anything driven by fear. This is about understanding how the brain responds to consistency, care, and rhythm, and how those choices add up slowly and steadily. The brain is not separate from the rest of the body. It's deeply connected to how you move, how you rest, how you eat, and how you handle stress. When those systems work together, the mind tends to feel more resilient. As we age, the brain continues to adapt. It doesn't simply decline, it reorganizes, prioritizes, and responds to how it's supported. That shift matters because it places agency back where it belongs. Brain health isn't something that suddenly disappears. It's something that's shaped daily, often in quiet ways. One of the most supportive habits for brain health is regular movement. This doesn't mean intense exercise or strict programs. It means consistent activity that increases circulation and gently challenges coordination. A daily walk, light stretching, or moving through familiar routines keeps blood flowing to the brain. That steady flow delivers oxygen and nutrients that support memory, attention, and processing. Movement also helps regulate mood, and mood plays a powerful role in how clearly the mind functions. You might notice this on days when you've been sitting for long periods. The body feels heavier, and the mind often feels slower along with it. Once you move, even briefly, clarity often follows. Sleep is another cornerstone of long-term brain health. During sleep, the brain doesn't shut down. It organizes information, clears waste products, and strengthens memory pathways. And as sleep patterns change with age, it's common to focus on the number of hours. But quality and consistency often matter more than duration alone. A predictable sleep rhythm supports how the brain restores itself. Going to bed and waking around the same time gives the brain signals of safety and stability. There are nights when rest comes easily, and mornings feel lighter as a result. Other nights feel restless, and the next day reflects that strain. Over time, those patterns become meaningful feedback rather than something to judge. Nutrition also plays a meaningful role, not through rigid rules, but through regular nourishment. The brain relies on a steady supply of energy. Skipping meals or eating irregularly can leave it underfueled. And that lack of fuel often shows up as fog rather than hunger. There are days when schedules get busy and meals get delayed. You may push through, telling yourself you'll eat later. By afternoon, focus slips and mental fatigue sets in more quickly than expected. But keep in mind, in those moments, the brain isn't failing. It's responding to imbalance. Once nourishment returns, clarity often improves. And this is a reminder that brain health is supported by consistency more than perfection. Regular meals don't need to be ideal, they just need to be present. Hydration works the same way. Even mild dehydration can affect attention and memory. Drinking water throughout the day supports circulation and helps the brain function efficiently. Have you noticed how much harder it is to concentrate when you're even slightly dehydrated? That experience is more common than many people realize, and it's often easily corrected. Sometimes the correction really is that simple. It might mean keeping a glass of water within reach instead of relying on memory to remind you. It could be taking a few steady sips when you notice your focus drifting, rather than pushing through the fog. Remember, small, consistent moments of hydration often restore clarity quietly, without effort or urgency, just by giving the brain what it needs to function smoothly. Our next habit is probably one of the most important for long-term brain health: mental engagement. And that's because the brain responds to challenge, curiosity, and meaning. Reading, learning something new, or engaging in thoughtful conversation keeps neural pathways active. These activities give the brain a reason to stay flexible. This doesn't require constant stimulation. In fact, depth matters more than volume. You may notice this when you're fully absorbed in a conversation or activity. Time passes differently. The mind feels engaged rather than scattered, and that kind of focus strengthens attention over time. and it reminds the brain how to stay present without strain. The mind, like the body, needs both rest and engagement to stay balanced. Quiet moments allow the brain to recover, but gentle challenges help it stay flexible and responsive. That engagement doesn't have to be demanding or intense. It might be reading a few pages of a book that holds your interest, working through a familiar puzzle, or even spending time with a simple game that keeps your attention focused. These moments give the brain a reason to stay curious and active without pressure, and they often make the transition into shared connection feel easier and more natural. Which brings us to our next habit: social connection. Social connection also supports brain health in powerful ways. Interaction stimulates language, emotion, and memory systems simultaneously. It reduces isolation, which is linked to cognitive and emotional strain. Even brief, regular connection can have a meaningful impact. A short conversation with a neighbor, a call with a friend, or shared routines all create mental engagement. These moments quietly reinforce clarity and mood. Stress management matters just as much, as chronic stress narrows attention and disrupts recall. When the nervous system stays activated for long periods, the brain shifts into survival mode. Reflection and memory take a back seat. You may recognize this on days when pressure quietly builds, as tasks stack up, thoughts race, and even simple decisions feel harder. Memory feels less reliable, not because it's weakened, but because it's overloaded. The mind is busy protecting rather than processing. But then there are moments when you finally pause. You step outside, sit quietly, or simply breathe without rushing. At first, the mind may still feel busy, but gradually tension eases, thoughts slow, focus becomes more accessible again. That shift doesn't mean stress disappears. It means your nervous system has been given space to recalibrate. Memory and clarity begin working with you again instead of against you. Calm doesn't require major change. It may be a quiet morning routine, a short walk, a pause before the next task. These small moments send a powerful signal of safety to the brain, and safety supports memory more than effort ever could. Another habit that supports long-term brain health is maintaining a predictable rhythm. The brain thrives on routine because it reduces cognitive load. When parts of the day are familiar, the mind doesn't have to work as hard to orient itself. Energy can be directed toward thinking, remembering, and connecting. This doesn't mean rigid schedules. It means gentle structure that supports ease. Regular times for meals, rest, and activity create stability. That stability supports attention and recall. Have you noticed how routines make certain tasks feel effortless? That's because ease frees mental space and reduces strain. Emotional health is also closely tied to brain health. Feelings like grief, anxiety, and prolonged worry occupy mental space. When emotions go unacknowledged, memory and focus often feel affected. The brain allocates energy toward processing those emotions. There are periods in life when emotional load increases quietly. Responsibilities change, losses accumulate, expectations shift. During those times, memory may feel less sharp. This doesn't signal damage, it reflects adaptation. Offering yourself patience during emotionally demanding periods supports recovery more than self-criticism ever could. Self-compassion plays a role here. Worrying about memory can interfere with recall more than memory itself. When you trust your mind to work at its own pace, clarity often improves. Confidence supports memory. Fear interrupts it. Pressure narrows it. Calm opens it. Have you noticed that when you stop forcing a thought, it often returns on its own? That's the brain responding to reduced strain. Ultimately, long-term brain health is supported by accumulation, not intensity. Daily habits matter because they repeat. Small choices, practiced consistently, shape how the brain adapts over time. This is why senior health tips often focus on foundational habits. They're effective not because they're new, they're effective because they're steady. Another supportive habit is limiting multitasking. The brain isn't designed to split attention constantly, and when tasks overlap, memory suffers. Focus becomes fragmented. Focusing on one thing at a time supports accuracy and recall. It allows the brain to complete one process before moving to the next. And you may notice how much easier it is to remember details when you're fully present. That presence supports long-term clarity. And the beauty in that is that sometimes presence changes memory simply by slowing the moment down. When you give one task your full attention, the brain has time to fully register what's happening instead of skimming past it. Over time, this kind of focused attention strengthens recall because the mind isn't constantly dividing its energy. Presence allows experiences to settle more deeply, which is what helps clarity last instead of fade. Reflection is also a habit worth cultivating. Taking time to review the day strengthens memory by reinforcing what mattered. This doesn't need to be formal. It can be as simple as recalling one meaningful moment before sleep. That brief moment of reflection gives the brain a signal about what matters. When you pause to revisit something meaningful, the mind reinforces that memory and organizes it more clearly. Over time, this habit supports both emotional balance and recall, because the brain learns to hold on to moments that carry meaning rather than letting the day blur together. Have you noticed that moments you reflect on tend to stay clearer over time? Reflection signals importance to the brain. As this conversation unfolds, it's worth remembering that brain health doesn't exist in isolation. Each habit supports the others. Movement supports sleep. Sleep supports mood. Mood supports focus. When one area improves, others often follow. That interconnectedness is a strength, not a vulnerability. It's important to keep in mind long-term brain health is not about avoiding every lapse or change. It's about supporting resilience. The brain continues to grow, adapt, and respond well into later life. Memory may change, but capacity remains. Wisdom, judgment, and perspective often deepen. These qualities rely on integration, not speed. Have you noticed that you may remember fewer trivial details, but understand patterns more clearly? That's not loss. That's refinement. It's the brain prioritizing what carries meaning. Daily habits support this refinement by reducing unnecessary strain. They create conditions where the brain can do its work without constant pressure. As you think about your own routines, it may help to notice what already supports your clarity. Perhaps it's a morning walk, a consistent bedtime, regular conversation with someone you trust, and recognizing those habits reinforces them. It builds confidence rather than urgency. Long-term brain health is supported by attention, not anxiety, and by care, not correction, by consistency, and not extremes. Every day offers opportunities to support the mind gently. These habits don't promise perfection. They support resilience. They remind the brain that it's safe, nourished, engaged, and supported. In that environment, clarity often follows naturally. Every day is another chance to care for the body that's carried you this far. Keep learning, keep moving, keep believing in your own strength. Because aging isn't slowing down, it's leveling up. If today's message resonated, take a moment to subscribe, leave a thought in the comments, or share this video with someone who could use a little encouragement. Because, together, we're proving that aging well isn't the exception, it's the standard.